Hi, I'm Frank Masiosi, and I'm here today with Jordan Glatt, and we're interviewing the four Republican candidates for Summit Common Council. We have Stephen Spurr at large, Bob Weck, Ward 1, David Fosgate, Ward 2, and Lisa Allen, also Ward 2. So with those introductions, I will turn it over to Jordan for the first question.
So first, I just want to say welcome and thanks for raising your hand to participate on Common Council. It is a lot of work and a great job, though. So, Steve, why don't we start with you? What caused you to raise your hand and run?
Sure. And first, on behalf of all the candidates, thank you, Jordan, and thank you, Frank, for having us today. Amanda and the rest of the Hometown Television TV crew for making this great segment work. With respect to your question, why I'd raise my hand against maybe my better judgment, or at least my wife's better judgment, there's two things for me that really stood out, and what motivated me is naturally, with respect to local politics and the civic environment, I was encouraged by current and past members of council, other community leaders that I respect in town to step up and continue my tradition of local service that started early on the housing authority, continues today on the zoning board, and folks around town said, we could see you serving on council and having a positive impact. But on a personal note, really what pushed me over the top there was the fact that I have a young family, 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. Our 5-year-old today just started kindergarten, and we plan to be here in Summit for a good 20+ years. So anything that our family can be doing, myself top that household, we want to be sure we're contributing back to Summit, and service on council is a tremendous way to have a positive impact on our community.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bob, what personal attributes make you right for council?
Thank you for that question. I think with any good leader, and that comes with experience, you have to be a people person. It's all about relationships, whether it's business, community, family members. You have to have those relationships. And I've always been a people person. I'm a strong communicator. I'll listen to the residents and business owners, because it's not what Bob Weck wants. It's what the residents give me, the facts and the information. And then, I'd make a decision with that. Part of that's also thinking outside the box mentality. So, in police work, as you know, I spent 30 years with the Summit Police Department, the last 9 as chief. And a lot of that was you had to make decisions and solutions, whether they were traffic related, crime related, but one size fit all wasn't always the right formula. And with that, I always work well with others. And, that's what it's about. I had a saying on my desk: teamwork makes the dream work. And that is so true, because you need all those different perspectives when you're working on a solution or a problem. And the last thing is my work ethic. I've always worked hard. Like I said, I was with Summit for 31 years. Every day I went to work and I was excited to be there. And I mean, that's a big part of it. As long as you love what you're doing, the old saying is, you never work a day in your life. And I'm happy to have done that.
Lisa, what's the one thing you would like the public to know about you? So
there's something, when I first moved to Summit, I was taken back by what an incredible and extraordinary community this is. There's so many people from so many backgrounds. And I think that something that I've never really shared publicly, because I think Summit has sort of this optics of wealth and education. I actually come from a very blue collar background, and I worked my way through college on my own, and I paid my way through college debt free. And over the years, I've evolved, and I ended up in one of the biggest financial institutions in the world, at JP Morgan, in one of the biggest cities in the world. So I think I want people to know that you can start from all places in life and get to where you want to go if you just want to work hard and have a little courage.
David, what would you say is the difference between a Republican and a Democrat on the local level?
Well, thanks for asking me that question, Frank, and to echo Steve's sentiments, and I'm sure my fellow running mates, thank you and Jordan for hosting this interview among us. This is a lot of fun. I'm excited to be here. I really think those differences at the local level are muted. Here in Summit, it's about Summit. and yes, I know, generally speaking, the political persuasions or parties of my friends, and they cross both sides of the aisles, and they're still friends. I mean, in Summit, these are people that you're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with on the soccer field. You're going to see at King's grocery store. You might grab a beer with them at the Elks or your favorite watering hole. And so, I've been told that in Summit, it's about Summit, and we as a running team together, want to keep it local. I do have a friend that I know is on the other side, and she has happily told me she will support me and endorse me, even though at the national level, she may not be so inclined to vote for someone of my party. And so again, that's our focus. And I think, if there's one party here in Summit, it should be called the Summit Hilltopper Party.
Thank you.
Steve, how do you feel the issue of masking is being handled by the school district?
Good question, and an apt question for our first day of kindergarten today in the Spurr household. I mean, look, it's been an unbelievable experience for the nation, for the world, making its way through COVID over this past 18 months. And sadly, we're not through it all the way. And what I respect that the school district is doing, and be it public, private, parochial schools here in the area, is listening carefully to the science, listening to the CDC, New Jersey Department of Health, as well as, of course, our Westfield Board of Health, to understand, what's new and what's happening latest with the COVID variant. So I'm grateful for what the superintendent here in the Summit Public Schools is doing to have an open and collaborative process. The Board of Education on this issue especially has done a good job soliciting public input on it, and rightfully expects to continue to do so. So grateful for the chance to chime in as a parent, and really encourage everyone continue to assess the science themselves, to speak up, to ask your questions. And Summit is thankfully not just thoughtful, but really a sharp community. And I think going to lead us through what's left of COVID to the best of our ability, keeping our children safe. And as a parent, a working parent, I'll tell you, keep those kids in school where they need to be.
Thank you.
Bob, putting aside municipal government, what do you believe are the philosophical differences between the two parties?
That's a great question. And I'm not a very political person, even though I've obviously thrown my hat into the ring in an election. But on the local level, I really think that we should all be doing what's best for Summit, right? So, and I know that you want to know the differences. And I really think the national shouldn't play in the local. And I know that sounds a little against what your question was, but I just can't really wrap my head around that we have to be one or the other. I really think that we should all be doing the same thing, right? I mean, when we're elected, it's not Ward 1 or Ward 2 when we become a council member. It's for all of Summit. And I think the same thing. I think there shouldn't be differences. I do know that there's fiscal, restraints and some other issues that weigh, on the national level. But I'm going to be myself, and I'm not really weighing in on that. I'm just really about what's best for Summit.
Lisa, every candidate talks about improving downtown retail. This is especially important now because setbacks caused by the pandemic. What do you think can be done to reinvigorate our downtown retail?
Thank you, Jordan. Our downtown is 96% full right now of occupancy rate. And I think by and large, the city has done a phenomenal job ensuring that our businesses survive. Maple Street was a great move. I think that the EDA and the fundraising that the Summit Group did, I think that was an excellent start. For downtown, I think today's problems are very different than what's going to happen in 10 years from now or 5 years from now for a couple of reasons. The pandemic opened up a whole new opportunity of issues. So in the past, we talked about, the internet is going to kill local business. And the businesses re-engineered themselves and they became viable. And so the pandemic now is some of the challenges that I have found with the businesses and talking to them. They're having trouble finding talent. Some of the spaces for the owners is hard to fill. And I think that what we can be doing to help fill our downtown is potentially creating a quarterly meeting with the council, the mayor, SDI, and the Chamber of Commerce to say, okay, what do we envision in our city 5 years from now, and work backwards? Because I think the biggest challenge is going to be filling the spaces. But in that challenge, there's an opportunity because the pandemic allowed people to work from home or realize that they're not going to go into the city. And so I think in order to really start thinking broader about what our downtown is going to look like in 5 years from now, let's work backwards. Let's pull in the right stakeholders, and let's think about, what's our marketing plan and how do we strategically find people potential. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me just say this. We have a huge hedge fund group, industry downtown. I would love to expand on that. I think that we can look at hedge funds, build a bigger financial district, build a bigger technology district. The one other challenge that we have to think about is there's a lot of redevelopment going on. If you look around our region, it's not just Summit who's doing redevelopment. Chatham, Berkeley Heights, Somerset, Warren, they're all building living space, but they're also building office space. So we have to really think about how are we going to compete against local towns besides the city. And I think that really begins in partnership and bringing in the right stakeholders to create the best plan.
Thank you.
David, there's a lot of emphasis on the downtown, but what would you do for the commercial areas in East Summit and West Summit?
I'm glad you asked that question, Frank, because had I gotten the question that Lisa previously did about reinvigorating downtown, that gets, a lot of focus in these debates and in these interviews. And, we have other neighborhood business districts that deserve our attention and our thoughtfulness as well. It's not all about downtown. Once again, it's about Summit. So those are areas that are important, not only to Summit as a whole, but to those neighborhoods and to those who are within walking distance. We're a pedestrian community. So there should be, accessibility to, retailers, to dry cleaners, to service providers, accountants, anyone that can help you in your life in those areas. And, I would like to see, SDI even expand its view to work hard to lift, have a rising tide lift all commercial areas of Summit, and have a more holistic view on business in our town. Our downtown is great. I'm not saying it shouldn't be focused on or worked on, but as a council person, I mean, that's the lens that I'm going to look through, as a wide angle lens.
Great. Steve, Union County taxes are a huge burden to our residents. Many in the past have tried different approaches to deal with the county. What would you do differently?
Sure. And I think if you look to that question, the phrasing of the question, Union County taxes are only a burden to the community if we're not getting good value back in return. And I think there's a simple step that we can take as a council, in coordination, of course, with the mayor and city administration, is to develop a really strong relationship with the county to ensure that, with a simple phone call, we can get in front of the county manager, the county administrations, the department heads, to help us solve some of the local problems we have with the tremendous resources that the county has. And so one of the priorities that I would certainly have serving on council is to raise my hand, as tough as it may be, to get in the car, to drive down to Elizabeth, to be present in those commissioner meetings, to really develop a personal rapport with the county government. I don't believe fighting them is the solution to this, but instead helping them to understand the needs unique to Summit and how the county can be a partner in delivering value on the tax dollars, the considerable tax dollars that we send to Elizabeth and distribute, frankly, around Union County.
Thank you.
Bob, with 565 municipalities in New Jersey, the concept of shared services has long been appealing. Where do you see opportunities for shared services?
Thank you, Frank. I think Summit's done a good job. We should always, with shared service, we should always be looking, whether it's services, it's equipment. Again, it comes back to what I said earlier. It's about relationships. Summit in the past has taken the violations and the court system and combined that with Berkeley Heights and New Providence for a savings. A few years back, we also did the combined dispatch center with New Providence and Milburn. And we got $1.6 million and then also another 900,000. And so with that, we need to look at other things. And one, just, you know, you have to throw them against the wall to see if they stick. And one could be combining tax office, maybe with New Providence and or Berkeley Heights. But to look at that and see, could we possibly save some money, but more importantly, could we do an efficient job and still bring those strong services that we're known for? Recycling is another one. You read about it, whether it's on Facebook or other social media. With recycling, we only have one vendor that puts in with a bid. You know, we read about the fights in the street and residents cleaning up after that they've, you know, done the recycling. So that could be possibly with the county or another surrounding town to see what we could do with recycling. And the other thing is we have to look for revenue where we can get it with that. And like I mentioned earlier, we have the violations in court and also the dispatch center. The state has grants for cities, towns that are doing shared service. And to my knowledge, in the past 4 years, we have not applied for any of those grants. And we have 2 great shared services. So I think that we need to look, if we have the shared services, let's see if we can get something for them from the county or the state.
Lisa, there's a lot of national press on the subject of policing and the role of the policeman. What are your thoughts on this as they pertain to Summit?
You know, that's a great question. It's been a big challenge over the last year. I actually did some community organizing a few years ago in Jersey City, and I saw extraordinary work there in how the community came together and they worked with their police and developed out their community policing. And when you look local in Summit, I think we have done a fantastic job in terms of community policing because everything is based on relationships. I think we have to look at what's happening around the country. We have to be sensitive to it, but I believe everything goes back to relationships, trust, transparency, and honesty. And if we continue to build that relationship with community policing, it works. It works in Summit, it works in urban America. And I think that is really the trend that we should focus on.
David, what, if anything, do you believe the police could be doing better? And how do you propose they should accomplish that?
Gosh, you know, from my point of view, it's hard to criticize law enforcement. I'm a big supporter and value everything they do in this town. I've met and spent time with Chief Bartolotti, of course, former Chief Bob Weck. I'm sad to see that he's resigning. I look forward to the next, you know, great police leader in this town. You know, as I'm out knocking on doors, the one thing that comes up time and time again is speeding through our great town. And that's important to me because I have not so small of children anymore, but one's already left the nest for college, but the other 2 don't have their driver's license. So their feet are their vehicles and they walk around town a lot. My 13-year-old loves to spend time downtown walking there from our home near Memorial Field. And I feel like I live at the infield of the Indy 500 between Mountain Avenue, Myrtle, and Tulip. We have some aggressive drivers. We've put out some signs letting people know how fast they're driving through the great help of the police force to, you know, draw attention to people's speeds. I've heard about it on Elm Street, on Baltusrol Road, on Ashland, even as you get past the speed humps. So, you know, listening to neighbors, taking, you know, comments about speeding and traffic safety seriously, as I know they do, working with the Department of Community Services to do studies and putting traffic calming measures where needed is important to me when it comes to policing. And you know what? Issuing citations, letting people know that, you know, enforcement is serious, but also doing it in a community respecting way. In fact, the first year I lived here, My wife grew up here in Summit, but we moved to New Jersey. I was on a cell phone in my car from a previous state. I could do that. A Summit Police Department person pulled me over, recognized that I was new, and politely said, here's the rules and please follow it. But I'm glad he stopped me and let me know. So anyways, that's what's on my mind these days when it comes to safety in Summit.
Steve, Summit continues to become more and more diverse. What should we be doing to make it even more inclusive?
Sure. So I think one element of diversity that Summit should take a serious look at is intergenerational diversity. So ensuring that Summit continues to be a welcoming community for young families, of course. My family is tremendously grateful to be here. We love the schools, and we're looking forward to many, many happy decades here. But kind of up and looking specifically at the senior citizens in town to ensure that the tremendous institutional knowledge that many of our senior residents stays here in the town. That we have a diversity of housing stock that allows folks to downsize and to stay in the community, still enjoy the tremendous amenities that our community does have, the community spirit that we all love and enjoy. So I think that's something specifically that I'd be interested to look at, and especially in the context of Broad Street West redevelopment. The current plans, and they are just concepts, look to include up to 180 residential units. And I think the community at large needs to have a serious conversation about the composition of that housing stock. And one element of that could be age restricted, for example, where we welcome a portion of that 180 residential units right in the core of our downtown to our senior residents, and expand the opportunity to keep that generation here in town to what I would believe everyone's benefit. So that's one particular element I'd be interested to explore if I'm fortunate to serve on council.
Thank you.
Bob, what is the most underserved constituency in Summit?
I don't know that I could just say one. I think you always want to do the best for all of Summit. Seniors, we try to do as many programs. We have, SAGE, which is a great entity that we work with. And so, but the seniors, we had made senior scams because we were seeing over the years that seniors were being taken advantage of through social media and or the phone. So, we built in the police department a program that we could educate them on that. So I think we need to just continue. I don't know if it's just one youth, knocking on the thousands of doors that we've knocked on. We used to have the Johnson Youth Center years and years ago, but you still do see it because the kids want to be more social and they want to get out. And I think that's one. And I think that's one where the community, just a great example would be, as I mentioned earlier with the scams, is partner up someone from maybe the high school with a senior and kind of go over an iPad or an iPhone and, things, how to work with. And it's going to build that relationship between our seniors and our youth. So I think the youth need to be served where we either build a place or we have a great, recreation community center. It's phenomenal, but maybe look to put some certain programs in there that will generate the young Summit residents to visit it and kind of build from there. So I think that's part of it. But every year, I think we should be looking and asking the residents, right? Because again, it's not what we want or what we think. We need to hear the voices from Summit. That's why I think all four of us are running, is we want to be a voice for the residents. And we're hearing that when we're door knocking. And I do think our young residents, that would be one.
Can I add to that? I think part of the issues that we deal with, whether it's local or national, it's making sure that the language we use is consistent and we have a common understanding. So what does underrepresented mean? And I think there are lots of different groups who feel underrepresented in Summit. And so once we identify what the language is and who those groups are, you work with the right organizations to ensure they get the help and the representation that they need.
Great. And then Lisa, Summit's constantly talking about redevelopment. What are your thoughts of the areas that need to be redeveloped and to be addressed, and for what purposes?
Absolutely. So we just voted on the $16 million firehouse. And that really opened up the opportunity to start having the next round of discussions, which is about Broad Street West redevelopment. I would say that is the biggest focus for me right now, because we have plans, we've already had virtual meetings, and everybody is really interested in what is going to happen in Broad Street West, in the Broad Street West redevelopment. So I would say that that is a very important area that we can evaluate to help broaden our tax base. But I also am hoping that we can use that area to also identify how do we serve some of the underrepresented individuals in our community. So I tend to think that we gloss over senior citizens sometimes. So I would love to see that any of that housing that goes in there is affordable. And it's also giving a location for elderly where they don't need a car. They're right downtown. They can get to where they need in a very quick manner. And so I would love to, I'm excited about how that direction that we're going. I do want to keep an eye on the balance of development and ensuring that it stays true to the character of Summit. There's a lot of concern in the community where people don't want so much, where there's a ton of congestion and traffic downtown. So just balancing the needs of a city that wants progress with a city that also moved here for the quality of life in, safe streets, safe neighborhoods, great schools, and staying true to that. So.
Thanks.
David, what are your thoughts, David, on the Broad Street West redevelopment project?
Great question. So it's going to happen. Enough work has gone into it that it will get done in some way. In fact, recently council, suggested that they're only going to focus on Subdistrict 3 at this point. I attended the virtual meeting, and there was a lot of public comment as to, the size, the scale, the scope, the aesthetics, the flow, that rightfully had them pause, which I think was a very, judicious decision. Let's think about this though. From the time it was identified as a redevelopment opportunity, given the master plan and the master plan revision, and we had actual public gatherings, bringing people together, saying what they thought, should be there, what they wanted, the world looked a lot different then. We've now gone through a pandemic. Everything's being reimagined. I work in an industry, technology, where it's reimagining the world in terms of working from home, in terms of a distributed workforce. The whole paradigm has shifted in 18 months to where, we're on a way towards, parking being less and less of a need over time, given autonomous vehicles and other technologies and services that emerge. And, to get the most value out of the real estate that we want, the developer wants to develop a lot to get the rate of return for the money that they would have to spend that we would want to take, to service capital needs and help our budget going forward. So while some of these things may kick off shortly, while none of us here on this call are on council, there's still a lot of work to be done. And I want to make sure we're asking the tough questions about, is it right in today's world for what we're building in scale and scope, as well as the legacy for which we're going to be left in terms of a 6-story parking deck, which would be one of the highest structures in town, and the need for parking going forward. Those are real truths. And I want to make sure those tough questions are being asked, because the developers are in it for a profit, as they should be. And one day they'll leave, whether they sell it to an institutional investor or otherwise, and we'll be left with, what's left there. And I want to make sure it adheres to the master plan and our well-being and the scope of this town going forward.
Steve, what are the biggest things in Summit that need to be fixed?
I can think of a couple of potholes around town, but I won't name names. But no, I think the biggest improvement that especially we on council, should we be elected to council, could look to improve is, I think, community engagement around these critical issues like Broad Street West redevelopment. There's been some examples recently where I feel civic discourse, public dialogue has really fallen apart to the detriment of the community. And I'll be the first one to raise the specter of gas-powered leaf blowers. And no matter where you stand on that argument, in favor or in opposition, of the pilot ban that is just recently expired, the process was painful, and in my opinion, needlessly so. I think with some new leadership, some new perspective on council, we can provide a process of community engagement for issues like gas-powered leaf blowers, which I wouldn't have ranked high on my list of priorities, but nonetheless came before council, and make sure that it's inclusive and make sure that it's representative of a diversity of perspectives. And where necessary, it accommodates for that diversity of perspectives. And one of the most disappointing things for me around gas-powered leaf blowers, the pilot ban, is the lack of criteria that the community would judge success or failure, and the lack of those criteria at the outset of that program. The confusion I think the community has today, as of September 1 and now moving into the fall, is did it work, did it not, and how will we objectively judge that? We don't have that criteria. It wasn't established in advance. And as a result, should council choose to re-examine it in 2022, I'm fearful that we're going to go through this cycle again of just dividing the community, where council should be really seeking to unite the community around issues, even gas-powered leaf blowers.
Thanks.
Bob, how would you manage the city budget? Can you identify new revenue sources or new ways of reducing expenses?
I think anytime that you have a budget, you have to review it. And I have some background in that with the $6 million police budget over the years. And one of the things I would do is one year, one light on might be more important than another one. And I would kind of move money, and I kept it pretty flat over the 9 years. So I think it's always reviewing what can we do better? Is there some technology that we might be able to use that we can implement? And we have to look at things that we've implemented and are they doing what they were supposed to do? So for example, the dispatch center that we had talked about earlier, that's been in, and there were some benchmarks that we wanted to hit. And I think as the county moves forward with a $4.2 million communications center, we just have to have the discussion. I'm not saying that that's a definite, but we have to have the hard conversations with everyone about what we have in Summit and where we can kind of loosen or tighten up the budget. And then just kind of thinking out of the box, any revenue is a good revenue, right? So we have a beautiful transfer station, right? The gem of Summit, the dump. And now we have a dog park in there that's only accessible to with Summit residents. But people in the surrounding communities are always talking about, God, I wish we could get access. So I had that conversation with a former and current director of DCS, and I said, look, if we did like 100 permits for out-of-towners and basic waste, and we charged $200 to $250, and would that affect personnel, manpower hours, or any tipping fees? And they said it basically would be like a drop in the ocean. So right there is $20,000 to $25,000 by letting 100, whether they're New Providence or Chatham or Berkeley Heights. But that's just something thinking outside the box. How can we generate some revenue? And that adds up over time. And if we do enough small ideas like that, that 20,000 becomes 50,000, 100,000. But I think we all have to look at ways we can think outside the box to generate revenue.
Thank you.
Lisa, where do you think Summit spends too much, and how would you reallocate that spending?
That's a great question, Jordan. Where do we spend too much? At the county, I feel like we are such a lean budget that every year they go through the budget process and they cut and they cut and they refine. And, I feel as though you can keep an eye on people, right? You can make people part-time, but I'm a human resource generalist by nature. And I feel like people are not liabilities, they're assets. So I think that if we could cut around somewhere near what we give the county, that's where I would focus.
Fair enough.
David, car thefts and break-ins are an issue, particularly given our proximity to Route 24. How would you deal with that problem?
Well, I don't have a badge or a gun, so I can't do so myself. But first education. I mean, listen, for the car thefts that have happened and/or the car break-ins. I mean, one happened to a close friend of mine. About a month or two ago, they found the car in Newark. It had been stripped down. It was returned, but basically, unsalvageable. And by his own admission, he left his key fob in the car. I mean, every time you hear about one of these or read about it in the TAP or whatever local news source, it's just simply because people have, made an honest mistake or just been lazy or not diligent, when it comes to car thefts. I do like the program we put in place, given the prevalence of Ring cameras and other products on people's doors, of having basically eyes in the skies, but on your front door, where you can save that information, share it with the local authorities, and use that to help prevent and stop crime or investigate crime and put perpetrators, in their right place. I love Sergeant Ryan Peters and the work he does on Facebook, giving helpful tips to the community. And so that should extend to things that are happening and most prevalent, be it car thefts and break-ins. In a town where I once lived, I was part of the neighborhood association there, and we had a city police officer come twice a year and just stand out in a local city park and give us great tips on how to prevent thefts, car break-ins, so on and so forth. And, being mindful of spending and mindful of money, I'd also, maybe even think about dropping a placard or a card in residents' mailboxes, be it once a month, once a quarter, or however so often, like the budget snapshot we get every year, to be top of mind for people, because not everyone's on Facebook, not everyone likes the Summit Police Department page, and people still thumb through their mail like I did today, and just helpful tips that you can put on the wall, or on your refrigerator, or even make a magnet along those lines that the Summit PD could put out to put on residents' refrigerators. I mean, communication and education is key.
Thank you.
If I could just add a little bit, kind of in my wheelhouse. David did a great job, and that is what it's about. It's about relationships, and we need really to get the community involved with see something, say something. There's so many times you hear over the years, I didn't want to call, I didn't want to bother the police, and I used to always kind of joke, we're like 7-Eleven without the Slurpees. We're open 24/7. Call us. We need to talk with our neighbors. If I'm going away and my neighbor has 3 cars, I could say to them, look, park one of your cars in and out of my driveway. And then the last thing, which I've always said, and I will always believe, that Summit has not only the best police department in Union County, but in the state. And they work hard. They're dedicated men and women. And a motor vehicle stop does 3 things. It stops or changes the behavior of the driver, whether they were on the phone, speeding, what have you. But then the second thing is other motorists that are driving by after they, are relieved that it wasn't them, they check their driving behavior. Maybe I need to put the phone, I need to slow down. But the last and one of the most important things is element that is coming in to do crime in our community. They're going to see a vibrant and a very active police department when they drive through, regardless of what time it is. And they're going to look and say, it's not worth it. Summit, police officers, they're everywhere. Let's go to a different town. And that's what we want. So I think back to teamwork makes the dream work. It's got to be everybody working together.
Thank you both.
Steve, if elected, and when your term does end, how would you like to be remembered?
This is a great question. I think for me, the measure of my success on council would have to be if I succeeded in being a leader, a community leader that brought the community together. And that's very subjective, can be very loose, but I want to be remembered by Democrats, by Republicans, young and old, folks, not just where I live in town on Woodland Avenue, but clear across town, as someone that always kept their door open, someone that was, not just willing, but eager to hear a diversity of perspective in town on the future of our community, and someone that was, again, able to bring all those divergent points together, never slam that door shut, but always keep a conversation going, and always keep that optimistic vision for our community front of mind. So that's something that, look, as I've stated at the beginning, I've got 20 years to, prove that right or wrong. That doesn't necessarily mean on council. I've loved my time volunteering to date. Even if I'm not elected, that's perhaps a standard, that we should judge ourselves as friends and neighbors in this community.
Thank you.
Well, we've run through our questions, and Stephen, while you have the floor, I think you had some concluding comments you wanted to make on behalf of the group.
Yeah, so, first, of course, and to bring us back where we started, thank you, Frank, thank you, Jordan, Amanda, the entire Hometown TV crew for hosting us today. We know it's no small feat to corral this number of candidates at this busy time of year. So we're grateful for the time and interest that you've taken to facilitate this communication. And as we look kind of the next 60 days, less than 6 days at this point, we want the community to know that Bob, David, Lisa, and I we're hard at work. We've knocked thousands of doors together, are hosting events across the community, and welcome comments, questions, suggestions, no matter where you live, no matter who you are. We ensure you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, our websites, and of course in person. And we want you to know that when you see us in town, stop, say hello. We want to meet you. We want to get to know you. And with that, we're grateful again for the opportunity to introduce ourselves today, share our optimistic vision for Summit, and we look forward to earning your trust and hopefully your vote come November 2nd. So thank you.
And thank you to all of you for raising your hand and for your willingness to do the hard work.
Thank you.
It is hard work.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Jordan.